Welcome to the Hedgineer Podcast with your hosts, Michael Watson and Jhanvi
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Hedgineer Podcast. I'm your co-host, Michael Watson, here with my fellow co-host, Jhanvi.
Hey, Michael, how are you?
I'm good. So what's it like to be a co-host on one of the best hedge fund, technology, data, and AI podcasts in the world?
It feels incredible. Super excited to kick off season 3. It's been a while since we've had our last episode, or we taped our last episode for season 2. It's only been a couple of weeks, but I know a lot has happened specifically with you. So why don't you catch the audience up on how the break between season 2 and season 3 has been for you?
Yeah, a lot happened. I mean, I wanted to go through everything that was going on within Claude, co-work, all that stuff, rollouts, but bigger thing happened, and that was the birth of my second child just 4 days ago. So that was
Congratulations.
Thank you. I was on site with a client in their Midtown office, just a couple blocks away from us, and awesome call. We were going over like how we're rolling out AI within their firm, and we had these really deep conversations on the role of first party skills and how they think about that as terms of their IP and how they can couple that with either skills that we have or third party skills. Either way, I'm going down that rabbit hole. And then I get a text on my phone from my wife. She's like, "Hey, I'm going to Lenox Hill. I think my water broke. I'll see you in 45 minutes. And I was like, oh, wow, that was not expected. We had like another at least 2 weeks until I was supposed to get a text message like that. It was totally fine. We were like full term and everything. So I go over to the office. We had like a group meeting. And at the end of that, I like pull your side. I was like, hey, by the way, I'm going to the hospital.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to be back for a couple of days. Hold down the fort. By the way, you did an awesome job. For anyone that's listening, Jhanvi is also the hedge fund or the Hedgineer COO and rock star, by the way. So you're just doing an awesome job running the company while I'm out. Probably even better than I was. But anyways, so I go and meet my wife at Lenox Hill. The doctors confirmed, yes, water did break. Yes, you're probably not leaving here without a baby. And so we go into the delivery room and just like slowly wait it out over like 18 hours. It gets closer and closer and closer. And then 5 o'clock in the morning on Friday, out pops our son. And it was this amazing moment where I see like this face staring kind of right back at me, crying, but not like crazy. A little purple at first, and then like he becomes flush. And then you kind of have all those whirlwind of emotions. And Sally was awesome, super healthy. Baby's now super healthy. Back at our place in Brooklyn, it's now like a whole new experience seeing my older daughter because she's so much older now through my eyes. Like at first, like for the last like she's about 19 months, so we have 2 under 2. She was still a baby. She was like this little like baby. She's a toddler, but I saw her still in like this infant version of herself. But now when I compare her to my son, oh my gosh, she's like a teenager. She is like a mature adult relative to him. And so it's been this whole new reawakening of like my daughter, and I see her in a different light. And my son's awesome, but like her and my wife are like super close. And my wife's mom flew in, so she's staying with us, and we have also help. So it's going great. But yeah, that was like a big season 2 to season 3 break, and I'm ready to kick off season 3.
Big update. Okay, so pivoting to season 3 in our first episode, one of the new things that I want to try out is having a segment where we kind of just go over what's new in AI, especially now that we're kind of releasing episodes every week, and we have this opportunity to be a lot more topical and really dive deep into what's going on. And neither of us had a ton of time to prep for this. So right before, we were kind of talking about some of the things that we wanted to talk about or some of the things that we were reading that we found were interesting. And one of the very common themes across all of them was this idea of companies pivoting and or focusing on building product for agents more than building product for humans. Like I was talking about the new Salesforce initiative that they launched around their like headless API, where essentially they're launching a whole new suite of MCP connectors as well as like agents and APIs that essentially enable users to meet Salesforce where they want to meet them in terms of building their own front-end applications and building their own kind of CRM user experience on top of the Salesforce API rather than just kind of leaning on like whatever comes out of the box. And then you were talking about the Claude Code redesign as well as all the things that Cursor's doing around making it more effective to kind of run through agents and build with them and things like that. And then there were a couple of other things, but maybe we can just kind of start there. Talk to me more about the Claude Code redesign, because I don't use Claude Code as often as I use Cowork. So I actually haven't used it at all since the redesign.
Sure. So it's not Claude Code from the terminal, which is where you're like,
Mhm.
people that aren't familiar with the terminal, that's like the scary black square on your machine that you type commands and weird syntax into. It's Claude Code for desktop, where it's similar to chat, but you get a terminal instead. And historically, you could only have one window at a time. And one of the things that they added was having multiple different windows into Claude Code for desktop. So for users that are not quite as technical, that they haven't used a terminal before, but they want to use more of Claude Code, which is actually a lot of our customer base, analysts, PMs, they want more control than what you get out of Cowork, but they don't want so much control that they want like a terminal and then VS Code. Claude Code within desktop is like a pretty cool in between. And so by them reworking the UI, having multiple different views into sessions all within their single Electron application was actually pretty cool. So I've been using that quite a bit. It's also, I've run a Windows machine. And so a lot of our users also run on Windows, and most people that are developers don't use Windows. They're used to either like using a Mac or they have a Linux VM. And so running code on Windows is something that is like, they don't do it. They think it's bad. You're not supposed to. But software's been written on Windows for a really long time. And when you have an entire user base that's all running on PCs, because that's where Excel lives, that's where Outlook lives, there is actually something really powerful of being able to use code that's also running on Windows. And my favorite thing for that is using something. This is going to sound a little bit technical because it is, but it's something that I've actually leveraged at multiple points in my career, from my 20s to my 30s, now to my 40s, is something called Win32Com. And it's a programming interface into Microsoft applications, most common of which are Excel and PowerPoint and Word and Outlook, that allows you to programmatically be able to access your Excel spreadsheet and pull in what value is in cell A1. But outside of Excel, you can do that in a separate process. And VBA programmers were very familiar with this for a very long time.
Do you need to have those applications open, or can you just access an Excel file in like your documents without even having Excel running on your laptop?
Yeah, you don't have to have it open,
Mhm.
but the actual power is, let's say you have an Excel and a PowerPoint and another Excel over here. You don't have to reference the files and say like, oh, where this file is located on my documents directory. You could say, I have one, go to my Excel window on my left screen and my Excel window on my right screen, and then start reading through both of sheet one, and then summarize that into an income statement and put that to a PowerPoint slide on my PowerPoint window directly in front of me. And so opposed to the code creating these files in the background and then saving down a .pptx file, and then you go and double click and you open it, you actually see it happening live. It's very similar to tool usage or computer usage that you have on Mac. It's been pretty popular. But because of Win32Com, it's just really cool library. And then for me personally, I've been a Python programmer since like my teens. It's all I did. Again, all I did in my 20s, all I did in my 30s, and even into my 40s.
You sound like a very cool person right
I know. If you talk to me at a party in my 20s and I had at least one drink, there was a 95% chance something we were going to be talking about had to do with Python. It was either going to be like, oh, Pandas, like a new Pandas library came out, or have you tried like Flask? It's just such a good upgrade from Bottle. But Python has these incredible hooks into the Windows subsystem through Win32Com. And so if you're using Python on Windows, now with the Claude Code desktop, it makes actually a very seamless experience of interacting with your Microsoft machine and these different tools programmatically running in parallel. When before you could have done it, obviously, with different terminals. And for me, I can comfortable with that, but for other users, they weren't necessarily as comfortable. It's just a very powerful experience now. Like alternative paths you can take, or you can use like the M365 MCP connector to go not to your actual Microsoft Outlook window that's on your computer, and instead go back to like the Microsoft Exchange server. But it's very powerful being able to interact directly with your inbox on your machine, or interact directly with the Excel spreadsheet that you're looking at right now. In the UX now with Claude Code on desktop just makes that a little bit more seamless and more accessible to semi-technical users.
Explain that. Explain, let's say someone's listening, not really a programmer, but someone that's interested in using Claude Code more. I think what you're describing is really interesting and powerful, especially since most people are running on Microsoft Office in finance. And so if you're someone that doesn't really know how to code, walk us through like an example of using this library and like constructing a prompt that could potentially help them build something like that.
Sure. So the first is Claude can be accessed to Claude.ai. That's in the browser. Pretty much everything that you go to a website, you open up Chrome or Internet Explorer or Edge, that's all through Claude.ai. The alternative is what's called a thick client. That's any piece of software that you download, and that's when you have Claude running on your machine and it opens up like a window locally. There's 3 different ways that you can interact with Claude locally. One is Claude Chat, the second is Claude Code, and the third is Claude Cowork. Chat, same thing that we're all used to. Now, the 2 more novel uses of Claude within Claude Desktop are Claude Code and Claude Cowork. I can go into Cowork a little bit in a second, because actually where we're doing some pretty large deployments for enterprises on how we can responsibly and scalably deploy out Claude Cowork to users that really don't understand what's happening behind the hood. But for users that do understand a little bit more of what's being run, Claude Cowork on desktop is a good option. Although you can always do Claude Code in something like VS Code. So for the user that's not as technical, download Claude onto your computer. You then go to the Claude Code tab. You then can launch a new Claude Code session with a GitHub repository. You don't have to use a GitHub repository. Like, you don't have to worry about that as much, but you do have to select a repository. And then you get a terminal. And that is where you can run commands that can start manipulating your machine. And because on Claude Code, that machine happens to be a Windows machine, it's the same that you use every day, you can ask, if you know what the right tools to use are, or you've worked with somebody like Hedgineer to configure that environment for you. Say, I have 3 different spreadsheets in front of me. They're each are modeling a separate SaaS company, and it is my income statement model that I want you to parse and then create a consolidated view of comps for all 3 of them. I've broken out on the next 4 quarters within the table. It starts at cell C1 for SaaS company 1. It starts at cell C2 for SaaS company 3. In the same location for SaaS company 4. You can see all of the line items for KPIs in column D. And it's going to then go the next 4 quarters for the next 4 columns. And after that, it just does annual estimates on a go-forward basis. Use the Win32com Python library. Open this up with Excel. It's now getting a little bit complicated, but just say that and start running through all of these sheets until you have a good understanding of how my models are laid out, and then summarize it for me.
Well, can't Claude already do that?
It can, but not by pulling up the sheets that you have open in front of you. And so, and it can also only do that for one sheet at a time. And so if you use Claude for Excel, the difference is that Claude for Excel will open up a side panel on the right-hand side and only interact with the Excel workbook that you have in front of you. But oftentimes you might have 3 different Excel workbooks and they're all open at the same time. And then I have one Claude Code session that can interact with each one of those 3. And so opposed to, if I want to be able to interact with them live, I can use this as a mechanism to accomplish that. What's also really nice is I can go in and make a change to like one of the workbooks, and then you could go back to Claude and say, "Oh, I actually went and updated this." Or you could say, highlight the cells across all of my open workbooks that meet a certain condition. And it can go and do that. So the difference is that Claude for Excel is really just with one workbook. When you use Claude Code with Win32Com, it allows you to interact with all of those workbooks that you have in front of you. The goal being is that I'm the guy, or we're the people that understand the Win32Com part. That's the technical part. And our clients are the ones that really understand the domain context of their models and their workflows. And we bridge the two together, just like all great asset managers and hedge funds have done, where you bridge really good technologists with really good domain experts to be able to create really strong investment platforms.
Yeah, the thing that you mentioned about Claude and Claude for Excel only being able to access one file at a time, that is by far the most common piece of constructive feedback I've gotten from our clients on Claude for Excel. They're like, especially if you're a member of an investment team that's covering X number of names, like a big part of your process revolves around comparing the models across companies to find the most lucrative opportunities to propagate up. And so I think every single client of ours that has used Claude for Excel has given us that exact feedback. Okay, how do I work on 10 files at the same time?
So yeah, what about for you? What are some new features that you've seen roll out over the last couple weeks that you think are pretty novel and getting you excited?
So last week, Claude came out with Claude Code routines, which is essentially like schedule tasks in Claude Code.
Mm-hmm.
I think the big difference is that it could run on a remote server, so your laptop doesn't need to be on. So I moved all my cowork schedule tasks to routines. I think it's interesting, but it's very, very similar to scheduled tasks. I don't think that there's anything incredibly novel about it other than the fact that it just doesn't run on my laptop. Other than that, Claude Design came out, and so a lot of people in the office on Friday were testing it out and playing around with it, and I was kind of looking over a lot of shoulders to see how that was going. Our head of UI engineering, Alex, built an entirely new UI kit with Claude Design within, I want to say, an hour, and it was actually very, very good. Our product manager put together some flowchart diagrams for one of the new products that we're in the process of scoping out within Claude Design, and he made it interactive. He also added like functions at the bottom of the page where you could toggle like the theme to go from dark mode to light mode or change the font. And so that was really interesting, like creating a front end that's also configurable. And doing that within like a one-shot prompt was really cool. Um, and so it's interesting. I'm seeing a lot of these like typical SaaS companies pivoting more towards APIs and building for agents. And then a lot of these model providers working on like building that front end more and more, I guess, trivial. And I think the two complement each other very, very well. Like very recently, Claude allowed for artifacts to be generated by MCP servers or artifacts to be powered by MCP servers in the backend. So you could, in theory, if you build an MCP server that connects to, let's say, your order management system, you can use Claude to build a dashboard that actually connects to that order management system every time you refresh it. And so it's definitely interesting to watch. It's definitely interesting to track to see how Claude is almost eating away at the competition. Like I don't know what's going to happen to the Lovables of the world when Claude Design is this good in its first iteration and this easy to use and already integrated with everything that we use Claude for today.
But I mean, I think that's interesting that to think how much does Claude start eating away at SaaS software? Because we also see like SaaS software creating skills and MCP servers as well to be able to integrate with this. I connected our QuickBooks to Claude to be able to start building out like more detailed financial models, understanding a little bit more around cash flows.
Yeah. And we're assessing new corporate card providers. And one of the things that we are very heavily indexing on is how good their APIs and agentic capabilities are, because we are literally building an agentic platform for our clients. That same platform exists internally. Like, why are we not having agents process all of our expense reports or having agents process all of our like end of quarter due diligence tasks and things like that? And so making sure that even operationally as a company, we're leveraging the software that we're building in-house is super important. And I'm sure that other companies are thinking in the same way.
Yeah. We don't use RAMP, but you were pointing out that RAMP has their CLI that wraps all of their underlying API. So if you want to use more Claude code directly, you could use the RAMP CLI to be able to navigate all of the different ways that you want to slice and dice and internal expenses in your GL.
Yeah. And like project management, same thing. Like Linear does a really good job at they were one of the first kind of project management MCP servers that came out. They're constantly making them better. We run all of our projects through Linear because it makes integrating with Claude that much easier, or integrating with Cursor that much easier. You can go directly into your code base in Cursor, highlight a section that's broken, Control L, and open up a ticket in Linear for a bug that you just found. And like all of that is just so seamlessly integrated into these like core key workflows that I think that's going to be the make or break for every SaaS vendor. Like, how easily can you integrate into these systems as people are becoming more and more dependent on them?
Yeah. And opposed to what it originally was is that how well can you compete with them? So Salesforce had Agentforce, and they really trying to push that. There is now some opening of like, hey, we can't beat them, join them. And there's plenty of fat to be able to chew on if you can better integrate with some of these AI tools. And by doing that over like skills and MCP is a way to be able to integrate where you still provide a tremendous amount of value of like thoughtful, structured data. You can put intelligence behind MCP servers, so you can still run agents over MCP, but you don't have to be the end-all, be-all of where AI lives within the firm. And I think that's an interesting topic around how we've started to partner with some third-party data providers that our customers use regularly. And so I'm curious if you touch a little bit on that. Like, how are we starting to think about MCP server design and helping different vendors and data providers think through what's the best way to design and build that for their customer base?
Yeah, so MCP servers came out in early 2024 or 20,
Yeah, the protocol from
2024.
Anthropic,
And we
first
were,
proposed it.
I think we built our first MCP server in-house that week. And so one of the big value props of Hedgineer is that we'll centralize all of your data in one place. And so when we originally started out, that was a data warehouse. Now it's really MCP connectors, or can I access all of my data for research, trading, operations, accounting within MCP connectors so that I can start building more and more complex workflows and start living in Claude more often. And so obviously, a lot of data providers have built MCP connectors. You can go to Claude and see all of the ones that exist and potentially turn on the ones that you have accounts for, but a lot of them don't. And so what we've been doing for the past 18 months is bridging that gap systematically for our clients, where we would build custom MCP connectors to connect to their order management system to get their portfolio. We would connect to alternative data sources that didn't have connectors. And then we would also connect to internal data, where we would organize all of their, let's say, internal research models and build a connector that sits on top of that. So you can start querying internal IP within your Claude environment, even the ones that aren't technically on your computer. And so as a result of that, we've just gotten a lot more reps at building MCP servers than I think most people in this industry, just because we've been doing it for so long. And so now that these data vendors are doubling down on MCP, recognizing that this is not going away anytime soon, and are in the process of building these servers, they're now starting to reach out to us and ask for advice on how to build them, right? And so a lot of the questions that we've seen across vendors are questions around what good tool design looks like, where skills fit into the MCP server design and implementation, and how to use those effectively. And also like how to go about testing these servers, because one of the things that I think is important to be wary of is the fact that when you are migrating people from one way of doing things to another, you need to establish a level of trust in that migration in order for people to effectively stick to it. And so the last thing that these vendors want is for everyone to asking a client to move to an MCP server and then that connector not accurately working within Claude. And so having a clear strategy around betas and rollouts and kind of iterating on feedback. And we're very well equipped to do that because not only are our clients already using MCP connectors that connect to these data vendors' sources, but we also have all of their usage. So we can also analyze the efficacy of those connectors when they switch from the Hedgineer built one to the official third-party data vendor.
So before we go into like a complex version of an MCP server, what are the simplest versions of an MCP server for people that are just thinking about it for the first time?
Yeah, so an MCP server is a way for you to connect data sources to a model like Claude or OpenAI. And there are three parts of an MCP server. There are the tools, which are essentially just the functions that the LLM has access to essentially call external data sources and query it. If you're not using any MCP connector, Claude is only searching through like the open internet and whatever data it's been trained on. You can't query, let's say, Bloomberg fundamentals consensus estimates from Claude, right? You need to actually access a Bloomberg database in order to effectively do that. So MCP is essentially the way that you can connect to those kinds of data sets, and tools are the functions that you could use. So you could have a tool called get all company tickers or get company KPIs for all of the different consensus estimates in the database, or get the price, the close price of a particular name for a particular starting name. All of these are functions that are tools that the MCP server kind of bundles together. Resources and prompts are essentially like recipes and rule books that you could potentially include in your MCP server for more complex instructions. However, I have seen skills start to dominate in the world of like creating more complicated workflows, leveraging skills more than these other two parts. But when MCP originally started off, these were the three components that were the most common and the most kind of used. And I know that you've also been talking to a lot of different companies in the space that are building MCP servers, and you've seen kind of two main themes around how skills are being integrated and even distributed to users of MCP servers. So why don't you start by just kind of giving context on that?
Yeah. And so there's been two different guests we've had on the pod, both awesome. So one's Kirk McEwen at Carbonark, and the other is Thomas from Delupa. Both awesome companies, both great entrepreneurs, great thought leaders, awesome guys, people. But they're approaching their skills a little bit differently, whereas at Delupa, they are open sourcing a lot of their skills and making them available in a GitHub repo. You can go to it right now. It's called Investing. And the expertise that they have around how to use the Dupa fundamentals data sources and financials data sources are available for anyone to look at and contribute to. And they then have a lightweight wrapper on their MCP server on top of their data sources for financials. And then they have skills that can describe different ways that you can use this data for a comp sheet, for relative valuation, for building out a basic model. And that's something that anyone can see and have access to. On the flip side, there is the Carbonark MCP server, where they actually have a lot of their skills defined in their server that an agent can access, be able to pull down some of that knowledge from and do work on your behalf, and then send you back results that have a little bit more curation happening. Now, from an end user's perspective, if the skills are integrated into your Claude environment and you have access to both APIs, in theory, you should get the similar type of results. But the way in which they're managing those skills and how they're being contributed to over time are actually quite different. What the bet that Thomas and Delupa are making around this are that the community will come together and make contributions to the open source skills, where you can crowdsource best practices. And a little bit more on the Carbonark side, and they're just a microcosm, they're just one example of this, that's actually their IP. They want to own that. They want to use that as part of their value creation and value proposition to their customers. So that experience that they get when they're interacting with their API, it encapsulates both their data, but also their kind of expertise in one product. So they might be able to charge a little bit more from that. And so it'll be interesting to see which of those two types of models play out in terms of open sourced skills versus closed source skills. And I think there's going to be room for both of them. Where I'm actually I'm actually thinking that like maybe and also in Delupa's defense, they also have Scout, which is their Excel plug, like their Excel AI agent that you can interact with as you're building up your models. And that has context that does exist server side that they don't necessarily give out for free. At least I don't think that that's just a wrapper around their investor third-party plugin. So they do have their agent. So I don't want to say like everything's there. But I am leaning towards over time is that the proprietary skills will win out. I've had at least 3 different conversations with very well respected kind of thought leaders in the space that are building proprietary skill libraries that they want to be able to monetize in various different ways. If you look at some of like the very large financial AI tools right now, like you could name like I'm not going to necessarily name it there. Primarily all they are is like very well curated skills that they've been building over like the last year and a half, wrapping an agentic harness and a pretty good data model underneath it. And so a lot of the agents that we refer to right now, whether they're using skills in the open format for skills or they're creating their own structure around it, it's still just very well designed prompting and using agents to be able to gradually disclose and pull more and more relevant skills depending on the task. But that's where a lot of the magic is happening right now with agents are where it's just a wrapper around very well-defined skills. And as long as users are willing to pay for that magic, that I do think, at least in the near term, the closed source skill libraries are actually going to start seeing a huge emergence as highly valuable forms of IP. We're not quite there yet, but like that's where I think the next couple 100 to like $500 million rounds in the AI space are going to be coming from, where there's no software really at all. It's just very well thought out, curated skills made by very small groups of people. Now, how those get distributed and the licensing associated to that is going to be interesting. And like we have we're also in the game, right? Like we're also rapidly building out we've been building out our skill library for a year now. Most of them are more technical. But talking to an IP team around, we have these skills. How do we license them? How do we allow for derivative works that a client can take these skills, identify, oh, I want a piece of this, I don't want a piece of that, and I want to create my own customization of it, where it might be a distilling of our best practices skill for Databricks and for portfolio risk and for research and earnings preview and earnings recap and catalyst tracking and relative valuation, and having really good Azure Terraform and having a great UI built on React, connected to Bloomberg, respecting SAPI authentication, all of these things that you've had to historically know how to do when you're building out technology systems for asset managers, that it all blends together. That's now being rebuilt in the form of just skills. And so how you go about deploying out those skills and allow people to use them is going to be like the name of the game of this next wave. And by saying like, hey, you don't have access to the skills at all, you just have access to an agent that has access to these skills and it does the magic, makes the licensing game a lot easier. It makes the derivation of these skills from licensing a lot easier. From the user's perspective, you're telling me it just works. I don't have to download your skill library. I can just interact with your agent directly. Well, that's a hell of a lot easier. Why am I even dealing with these skills in the first place? And so I do think that we're going to be leaning on the side of proprietary skills, but those skills are going to be wrapped within agentic interfaces, oftentimes exposed over MCP. So you're still connecting to an MCP server, but that MCP server is going to be something that is an agent, has really good context and data around it. And then it just knows how to do the different workflows, answer the different questions that you want without having to worry about where the skills live. And I think that that's where we're going to see more and more of, but we're going to see that actually as agents. It's not going to be packaged as like, oh, really good skills. It's going to be primarily packaged through frameworks and agentic libraries. They're going to be more often over the next probably 12 months access directly over MCP without having to have a proprietary or dedicated UI built for an agent framework. So opposed to having like, I'm new financial services.ai startup with my own really nice UI and we have our agents, it's just going to be like those agents and the skills for context, access to really good clean data, and you interact with it over MCP and then plug that into whatever tool you're using. And so that's like where a lot of these next waves are going. What we do is just like, hey, you also need your own internal agent. You need your own internal AI. You need your own internal skills. It needs to interact with all of this third-party data. How do we enable you to be able to have that? And we've been iterating on that quite a bit. We have some pretty cool stuff that we'll be releasing over the next couple episodes. But it's an interesting time in the role of skills in conjunction with agents is rapidly blending and evolving.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to summarize and distill a couple of the core concepts that you mentioned because I have been talking about this exact same thing with a lot of different data vendors. I think this might be one of the most interesting and topical discussions around MCP design and usage across like kind of the AI community and all of the people that are building this with us. There's essentially a bunch of different layers when you ask a question in Claude. The first thing that happens if you were to ask a question like, generate a summary for me of all of the conversations that happened in our platform AI channel in Slack, right? Let's assume that we already have a skill called like Slack usage, and it already summarizes all the different Slack channels, what they're used for, who talks on it the most often, whatever. When you ask that question in Claude, the first thing it's going to do is search through all of your skills to figure out if there's any skills that would help in answering this question. The answer is yes, it's this skill. It's going to pull that skill into memory, and then it's going to follow the instructions outlined in that skill. And oftentimes, those instructions include calling tools within MCP connectors like, let's say, Slack. And so when you say open source skills, you're talking about the skills that show up in your settings when you go to Claude and you actually look through all the different skills that you've uploaded. Or if you go to GitHub and you find some interesting skills, you download them and upload them. Those are all skills that you have access to see, modify, and leverage. And they're all sitting within your Claude account. And so those are open source skills. And that's like the DeLupa model that you mentioned. The second is closed source skills. And I think those are slightly more complicated. Here, what we're saying is that instead of the question automatically checking through all of the skills and finding one, it doesn't find one because that skill doesn't exist in your Claude settings. But there is a tool call within the Slack MCP called Analyze Slack Channel. And then within that tool call, there is a parameter where you can pass in the channel name, like let's say Platform AI. And in that function, it's actually calling the LLM again and using natural language processing to read a skill that's hidden to you, understand all of the different components that come with summarizing a Slack channel, and then it actually executes that within the tool itself and then returns an answer. So for you as the user, you have no visibility into how Slack defines summarizing a channel, but Slack has the ability to build that skill, grow that skill, improve that skill, and own that skill and own the underlying IP of that knowledge without necessarily ever having to expose it to other people or potential competitors, etc. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
I think this is a super interesting discussion for two reasons. One is obviously more and more people are commoditizing AI software and skills are a really big part of that. And I remember like when skills first came out, you, me, and another member of our team had like an hour and a half discussion around like, what is the monetization strategy behind skills? Because at the moment they were all open source. People were still figuring out how to use them. And now we're seeing this world where we're systematically starting to kind of layer skills into the tools so that one, tools can become more powerful. They don't just have to be simple wrappers on APIs. And two, we can start reducing a lot of the noise that's happening as people are just starting to create and download all of these skills. Like one of our clients, we've only been working with them for, I want to say 4 months, but we're already reaching a stage with them where they're like, okay, every single person has like hundreds of skills in their settings. I don't know which ones are good. I don't know which ones are bad. I don't know if sometimes they conflict with one another. It's just this giant mess of skills. And a lot of these skills don't necessarily need to exist in the settings. Like, for example, one of the things that we do is when we build all of these connectors for all of these data vendors, we'll have an intelligence layer that sits on top of that actually helps you join data from different data sets together. Like, for example, let's say Visible Alpha keys their consensus estimates off of company name, and let's say Bloomberg keys it off of ticker, for example. Having some kind of skill that outlines that and says, hey, if someone's asking for a report that uses both Visible Alpha and Bloomberg data, this is how you go about joining that. And that's a skill that sits as an open source skill right now, but we're in the process of moving it into a closed source skill because it's not something that the user ever really needs to interact with or be exposed to. So it doesn't necessarily make sense for them to see all of that noise because that's only going to grow linearly as we continue onboarding more connectors and people start using skills more and more frequently. And so I personally think that open source skills are really for the purpose of codifying workflows or codifying processes that leverage multiple connectors together. Like, for example, Delupa's skill on putting together, let's say, an IB deck, right? And then I think that closed skills have their place in making MCP connectors just much, much better. So, for example, if you're querying consensus estimates from a data vendor and there are different types of KPIs based on the sector of where the company is in, having a skill that teaches the LLM how to go about navigating all of these different KPIs and what to pull for what company, and having that skill sit on the server side, I think makes a ton of sense for everyone, for all parties involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there's going to be a renaissance of skill development that's going to happen over the next 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be firms whose valuations are going to rapidly increase and other firms are going to rapidly decrease. And the headcount is going to be very small. And they're not going to be tech companies, or at least they're not going to be tech companies in their traditional sense, where there's a CTO, a really strong engineer. They're all technologists. They're going to be domain experts, very clearly articulate their workflows, know how to build and design skills very quickly. They understand how a lot of this works. They have some lower level understanding of the information that's being processed as part of the workflow. So they understand databases, MCP, API connectors, but the ability to scale that expertise, like, it's now very real. And it's going to be very advantageous for a lot of firms that already have very good workflow IP development that are in a position to be able to redistribute that and license that over the next 6 months. There's going to be a lot of interesting acquisitions of firms that can build a brand, can have really good workflows and skills being defined as part of that brand, and then other firms that are trying to figure out what is their strategy for encapsulating these workflows as part of their AI solution can both acquire that brand and their IP that's already been proven to work with skills, put that within their platform as part of their product offering, and you get that almost stamp of approval. And I think it's gonna be fascinating. And, like, who does that acquisition? Is that ever going to be something that is more so on the model providers? But it was interesting to see OpenAI acquiring for a couple $100 million a podcast, right? Like, there's a podcast and brand associated with the media. I think that there's also elements where you blend media, skills, content, and technology together in just very new and interesting, novel ways. And I think that's going to start snowballing and morphing over the next 6 to 18 months. Hopefully, we're part of that conversation.
Yeah. And I also think that, or at least one of the things that I'm starting to notice as skills and MCP connectors become a bigger and bigger part of companies' processes, is that the onus of good process and good design and good workflows sits on the company more than ever.
Yeah.
Like, I think, I don't know, a couple years ago, like, I'm not a project manager. I'm not good at project management. But since I was using Jira from Atlassian that had a very good user experience and a very good UI that codified best practices around how to manage a project over time, I was able to lean on that very, very heavily. And so when I see things like Salesforce moving away from building UI and moving towards building APIs for agents, or I see Claude investing so much in building really good design systems and the ability to actually turn code into dashboards really quickly. Like, I think that this can go one of two ways based on the quality of talent at your firm and the way that you think about adopting AI. Either you are aware of the fact that you need to be a lot more thoughtful in what that final dashboard looks like, or what that final earnings preview looks like, or what that final investor report looks like. And you are making sure that you are training Claude to do something that is good or build something that is good and scalable. Or you don't, and you just write down all of the things that your firm's already doing, whether it's good or bad or broken. And those broken pieces just stay broken forever until it's too late and you realize that you've fallen behind in whatever race you're participating in the industry that you're working in. But like, I see so many people using Claude to build dashboards now, which is great. I see so many people using Claude to build PDFs, which is great. But if that dashboard is really difficult to read and understand, or that PDF is structured very strangely, like that badness just stays, because skills codify practices whether they're good or bad. And Claude Design will design whatever you want it to design, even if it's good or bad. And so that's one of the things that I think about a lot, especially as we're a company that's building AI software. Like, I spend a lot of time thinking about design, and I spend a lot of time thinking about taste, because Claude, that's the one thing that AI isn't doing right now. It's not crafting good practices for you. It's just helping you rinse and repeat whatever you tell it to rinse and repeat.
But to build on that and to take a bit of an opposing view, I don't think that the Salesforce analogy, moving away from dashboards and two-agent tools, implies that they are also moving away from opinionated workflows and process design. Because just because you don't have the Kanban board doesn't mean that you want to track issues from a to-do, in progress, development complete, and deployed to production workflow. You just don't have to do that within the Kanban UX. So the technology companies of the future, even though they might not have an out-of-the-box dashboard that's the interface that users go to, they still need to have that taste that you're describing, so that when users use their AI solution, whether that is a single MCP server that represents an agent, or a set of skills and MCP servers that allow them to interact with their data, that opinionation and taste still needs to exist, because people are lazy. At the end of the day, you go to a solution provider because they do the work that you would otherwise have to do for you, and you pay them an amount that is representative of how much that might cost you, or what the value of what they're providing is. That's either a cost plus or a value-based proposition model. But if you're putting more work on me to use a new solution, I probably won't do it, or I'll say like, hey, this solution sucks. And oftentimes you see that with people when they use the first implementation of AI, where they're very disenfranchised or unimpressed with the results, because that taste that needs to sit on top of AI has not been applied. And that is where it's very important for us, or anyone that's in a technology solution provider using AI, to be aware of that they must apply taste and opinionation of good process and workflows as part of their offering, so that when a user that's inherently lazy or inherently busy, or whatever it is that makes them human, goes and uses it, it just works. And if you can do that, that's when you're cooking with gas and you're building really powerful agentic tools. And when you're not, that's when you get people that say, yeah, I'm not really that impressed with this whole AI thing. It doesn't seem to be working. I tried entering something in and it was completely lost. There was no taste. There was no process.
I think that's idealistic. Like 5 years ago, if you were working at a large company and you get a call from like your ops teams, like, yep, we're all migrating to Salesforce, deal with it. We're going to be working with the Salesforce implementation team to set up all the dashboards, and like, you need to move to that, right? Let's imagine the average person, like middle of the bell curve. They have no choice but to migrate to it, even if learning it is tedious. And even if the final solution of Salesforce implementation is better from just an objective workflow perspective than whatever she was doing before. Now you live in a world where you move to Salesforce, but you could access all of the data within APIs and MCP connectors. Is that person going to move to the dashboard that their company is enforcing them to use? Or are they going to go to Claude and just describe what they're already doing and build a dashboard that's just for them that codifies the same bad practices that push the entire company to move to Salesforce in the first place? Like, data is data is data. How people are actually consuming it, if it's up to the individual, starts distributing on a bell curve rather than being objectively good or objectively bad.
But to push back on that, I think that the person that has to go in and re-describe a workflow or a process, oftentimes for the first time, when before they were using a dashboard, whether it worked or not, they didn't have to think about, they're going to lean towards, well, what is the default dashboard that it gives me? Because they don't always want to put so much time and effort into every detail of their workflow. Oftentimes, they're going to take whatever works off of the shelf. And even if the interface changes to AI, they still want, what is the out-of-the-box skill telling me what to do, or what's the easy button giving me? And if that's good enough, they'll oftentimes just use that because they're busy. And so I do think the way that you're describing it, I think that's what's going to differentiate great companies from bad ones. And I think that's where great culture will start to separate itself from the pack from mediocre culture, where just accepting what AI gives you out of the box and not doing the hard work of thinking through your workflows and processes from first principles and then recodifying them in a skill that is your own, or using that to underwrite the out-of-the-box skills and workflow that you're getting from third party, is going to be what good companies of the future are built upon. But I think that that's not true for everyone. Like, and also people are busy. I am empathetic. I get it. That sometimes you do just want the dashboard of the skill that just works, gets the job done, and you can go home to your kids, which I'm going to do right after the show, and say, like, you know what, we're going to call it a day. This skill is good enough. Thanks, AI skill company, for adding this to my organizational skills. And it's not great, but it works.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that AI, when implemented correctly, just is a reflection of your company's values and competency. And so I think the gap between the good and the bad will just keep widening as people start doubling down on AI as a reflection of what their company is, and not just this chatbot that is more generic.
And with that, that is the end of the first episode of season 3. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Again, this is your co-host, Jhanvi and your other co-host, Michael Watson. Till next episode, we will see you guys later. Check us out on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the other ones, and take care, everyone.
The Hedgineer Podcast releases episodes weekly on Tuesday. Our hosts are Michael Watson and Jhanvi. The Hedgineer Podcast is produced and edited by Aaron Free. Follow us on your social platform of choice and reach out to us at podcast@hedgineer.io.